Yo, welcome back to another episode of the South Star Classroom. That's Omar. I am Charles. David will be joining us soon, and we will have our lovely Jubilee back the next time we do a show. But man, how you doing today, Oh?
Stressful day today, man. Stressful day. A lot going on, dude. We got a ton of stuff going on in the country, but we always forget like what is going on in the personal lives of people. I've been to more funerals this year than I would care to count or imagine, brother. So
Mhm.
I'm kind of gripping with that. Some friends going through some stuff, but at the end of the day, man, we're here. We're happy to have a show. We're happy to have each other. Happy to have the camaraderie of friendship. Happy to have the beard of knowledge join us
Oh,
in his San Diego hoodie hat. I mean, this man looks straight out of Cali.
I mean, we
Like
actually
straight out of
we
the
had a
Cali.
conversation before and coordinated these outfits. We both hoodie and
Indeed.
hats today.
It looks
Hell
like
yeah.
it, man.
How you doing today, Mr. Castillo?
Hey, good evening, afternoon. I didn't know we were live yet. That's interesting. Good thing I was
Live AF.
Look, same
Yeah.
time every week, brother.
I know.
Wait, word?
Hey, I thought punctuality was a trait associated with whiteness. What's going on here?
You know,
Ooh, we're being oppressive. We're
Right.
being oppressive for being punctual. Yeah. We're being oppressive.
I have been on times where I've been
Good
early somewhere.
callback.
Somebody told me I was acting white, so that's terrible.
All right.
That's terrible.
It's a good ass callback to last show, man.
Ooh, man. Good. Things are good. We are now in the home stretch, heading into the holidays, both on the work front and on the home front. So that's all looking good, and looking forward to diving into this rich conversation today. Big
Hey,
topic, Charles. Yeah.
operative word, rich. I think
Apropos.
I'm limping into the holidays and the end of the year. I mean, I'm blessed. Things have been incredible. My life is incredibly blessed. I am tired. That's why my face looks like this, but I'm really, really blessed. And got to do some cool stuff last week. Was in DC, got to speak on some of the research that we've been doing. I'm excited for this other research that David and I are putting out soon. It's still embargo, still being tweaked a little bit, but very, very proud of that. And yeah, man, and what's made me happy is Jamie Foxx has returned. I'm a big Jamie Foxx fan. His new special is on Netflix. He's not paying me to say it, but Jamie Foxx is extremely funny and talented, but it's much more cathartic being how he almost died, and he's going into that, and he has his daughters very prominent. It is somebody who almost lost their life and is very appreciative. I thought about my friends with daughters. Like I thought about, my homie Dave, who's in here now. My cousin Alec. Like it was very interesting of fathers of daughters and when he was going through this process. So go watch it. It's on Netflix. But
All right.
I want to do a quick breakdown. All right. And that way, I scripted it. Okay. I'm organized today and I wanted to do this so we could just have at it. All right. So
Organized AF, baby.
Yes, I got you. So let's just dive in. All right. So welcome back. And we're about to dive into this heavy but important topic. Last week, the CEO of United Healthcare, Brian Thompson, was tragically and shockingly assassinated outside the Hilton Midtown Hotel in New York City. Authorities have called it a targeted attack, with reports saying the suspect, Luigi Mangione, waited for hours to carry out this act. This wasn't random. It was calculated. And it's left a lot of us saying why. Again, I don't know if this person did it or not. They're just a suspect. So I don't want to give full credence to that. Now, this isn't just a story about one person or one tragedy. Events like this always reflect something bigger, something deeper about where we are as a society. Thompson was a symbol, whether he wanted to be or not. As the leader of massive healthcare corporation, his position represented power, wealth, and influence. Things that are increasingly under scrutiny in a world that's just grappling with economic inequality and rising frustrations. And then there's the rhetoric, like phrases like "eat the rich" have made their way into the public discourse more and more. What does that mean for how we process power, inequality, and these kinds of tragedies? And are we as a society entering a phase where these sentiments are no longer just slogans, but calls to action for better or for worse? You know, here's where it gets personal for us. How do schools talk about power inequality and these societal shifts? And should we be preparing young people to make sense of this, or does discussing events like this in classrooms only complicate things further? And we also have a parent that's on here. I'm interested how David talks to his son about it, if they have or not. We just got a lot to explore today. Let's jump in. I think the other tidbit that's a bit personal is, you know, I was on a board. I was a senior member of the UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital Board. We oversaw $4-point-something billion in hospital stuff. And I used to regularly get letters or emails or things like that, especially when it was time to negotiate with the unions or things like that. Even though I didn't have real power in that, I represented that for a lot of people. Also represented when a kid got, you know, was sick and had an incredible surgery and all that stuff. You get that, but you got to take the good with the bad. So, fellas, I just wanted to dive in and just the first question that I had, and you know, I'll let you get situated, David. But why don't you kick us off, Omar? Like, what does this assassination just say about societal tensions and inequality?
Dude, I mean, we were talking about this before the show began, and man, I can't wait to hear what Bill Conrad has to say about this, man. Because and Bill, remember,
Bill's
man,
a wild boy, and he's going to get us all on an FBI watch list.
Oh man, I love Bill, dude. I think his outtakes
welcome,
are badass, Bill. Man. And just make sure that them outtakes don't have too many cuss words, Bill, so we could share them. Look, man, like I have this like long string of thought that I'm going to quickly consolidate. And this sounds like Good Will Hunting. So for everyone out there that's like, what kind of graduate school talk from Good Will Hunting are you giving? I'm like, calm down. In the bar, Good Will Hunting, he's talking about like the American Revolution, talking about, you know, the agrarian economies of America. There's a guy that he mentions named Gordon Wood, wrote a really cool book called The Radicalism of the American Revolution. And the radicalism of the American Revolution is one of which this was a crazy revolution, because this was a group of people who were basically fighting the injustices of being overtaxed and underrepresented. The Russian Revolution, the French Revolution, the Mexican Revolution, the Bolivian Revolution, the Venezuelan Revolution, all these revolutions have always been about these two things: money and power, and the lack thereof in the people. And when people, the Cuban Revolution, when people feel as if they are starving to death, when people feel that their representatives are not being representative of their needs, when they see the ludicrous richness of, say, Tsar Nicholas II and his daughters, Anastasia, you have a Bolshevik revolution. You have a group of people who ultimately say this has gotten too far, where the rich are not only so rich that it is incomprehensible the level of money that they have, but then their lack of empathy and understanding for our basic needs as humans is going completely unnoticed. And we think that this chasm is extraordinarily large. This is the cause of almost every single revolution across the planet. So, you know, Doc, you and I were talking about let them eat cake, the famous words from Marie Antoinette, right before the French Revolution and the beheading of her and her husband, King Louis XVI. I think what the like irony and what I want to really drill into here is the suspect, Luigi, which, by the way, I got to tell you, just a complete aside, I've never known a real Luigi outside of Mario and Luigi. Never. I don't know if either of you have ever met a real Luigi. I ever met Wario or Waluigi yet. I hope that day comes. But like Mr. Luigi came from, you know, the University of Pennsylvania. That's an Ivy League school. Came from a very rich family in Baltimore. Came from a very privileged prep school. So it's that's where I'm like grappling with. And it's, look, I don't ever want to say that anyone on the show or me condone murder. Like, let's just get that out into the clear. But what I can say is that I've studied revolutions enough to understand that people going out into the streets and murdering those who have, while those who have not are dying of starvation, has been something that has happened over millennia of years in this world. It's just weird that this Luigi guy was the one who came out and did it. So I'm still processing it and grappling with it. Maybe you guys have some like cool takes on it, because I got to tell you what this says about society, Doc, is that society's fucking fed up. It's just weird that it would come from someone who's not dealing with the difficulties that society is currently facing. You know what I mean?
Got you. Well, thank you for that, man. I mean, what a question to you, David. What is assassination saying to you about, the societal tensions? And you can respond to Omar as well if you like. But yes.
Yeah, I think I can do both. So societal tensions, definitely. I mean, we know this just based on the tensions that we all experienced leading up to this recent presidential election, and just the level of the veracity of the rhetoric, I think would be appropriate to say. And so we know that that's a real thing. I think, going back to this, the man that was assassinated, Brian Thompson, for this guy, for Luigi, he was like the symbol. He was like the symbol of this, profit-driven healthcare system, which we do have, right? It's driven. It's an industry, and they are driven by profits. That's 100% true. Is the CEO going to be able to change all of that? No. There's so many other forces at play, and so I think for me, when I hear about the social tension, for sure, the other piece was the inequality piece is interesting too. I mean, it's very clear. I mean, we probably should have had some of this data. I could maybe look some of it up. Just, around like healthcare, access to healthcare, people that don't have access to healthcare, even people that have full-time jobs that have a regular healthcare insurance plan still have a hard time getting care, right? You have to like advocate for care. And if you are, maybe not 100% like able to communicate these things, or uncomfortable pushing up against the system to get care and to get claims processed, a lot of people fall into this trap where they have health insurance, but they're actually not able to fully access the benefits of the benefit of health insurance. I think there's an inequality piece in that. And lastly, I think there's this interesting kind of like Robin Hood narrative here with this guy. He's obviously from a well-to-do background. And so he's going to be the guy that's going to come along and save us from all of our woes related to accessing healthcare, right? Well, if I call my provider today versus 2 weeks ago, it's still going to be the runaround, right? And we actually have United Healthcare. But at the end of the day, this is a man, he's a father of 4 children, and, you could say like, it's a murder. Murders happen all the time in New York City. But there's something that's very symbolic about this. But I also think about the fact that like, last weekend in Chicago, there were 4 murders. The weekend before that, there were 6, last weekend before, or in Oakland, or, in the Middle East, where we're pushing, 60, 70,000 people have been killed so far, 20,000 children. So, yeah.
Yeah, man. But like, really quickly, like, that just reminds me of both the monologue that the Joker had in The Dark Knight Returns, which, by the way, is kind of a ripoff of a George Carlin bit. So for in our audience, people are like, what are you talking about? In The Dark Knight, the Joker is talking to Harvey Dent, and he's like, but it's all part of the plan. See, a group of people in Africa die, or a bunch of kids accidentally get killed, and no one bats an eyelash because that's all part of a plan. But you kill one little mayor and the whole world goes crazy. Carlin ripped off, not ripped off, he was kind of the originator of a line of comedy in that thought about
Yeah.
we have genocide across the world. You have homicides in Chicago that go completely unreported, but because they're either not famous or low income or drug dealing, well, that's all part of the plan. So we don't bat an eyelash when those people are killed. But one CEO gets murdered, and now the whole world starts discussing it. I got to tell you, it is symbolic because we're here talking about it, but that's because this country is now in a position to say, oh, the people who are at the highest chain, who are constantly protected, are getting killed. That's not the plan. And I got to tell you, in any revolution, that is the plan. I'm not saying that like this is something, again, I want to be really clear about my position here. This is not something that I'm saying I advocate. I'm saying I've studied history a lot. I've studied the revolutions a lot. And to start pinpointing the rich and going after the rich to create high profile cases like this are usually the very first sign of not only societal revolution, but I can guarantee you, like, FBI is probably going nuts right now because you know what's happening? Copycats.
Yeah.
I bet you
Sure.
there's hundreds of people across this country looking to copycat this scenario. And I wonder what that says about where our society's at. Because David, you even mentioned Robin Hood. Are people celebrating this? Are people
Yeah.
looking?
I've seen people celebrate it.
Oh, I think people.
I've
I
seen
mean,
people.
I've
seen people celebrate it.
You talk about celebrating. I'll put something up, but I think you're you know, it's interesting though, because I think you're starting to go into the second question, just dovetail into it, fellas. Like, you know, are we as a society actually entering this eat the rich phase? And because and I guess what I would say about it is this, right? Just to answer the word and throw it to you guys for the second part is, I don't even know if this guy did it. I really don't. I know, honestly, I have no clue. But I think at this point, it doesn't matter because the symbolism is already there and pungent. Like, let's say it's somebody, he was messing with somebody's wife and they got mad and shot him. Whatever. That story, even if that were the case, it does not matter anymore. It is now these fat cat, you know, healthcare people are like, that are like, as you just put in the notes, Omar, and you can tell the people, I think 27 million claims were denied or things like that. You know, this person became a symbol. Both of them are symbols in different type of ways. And what does that mean? And like, if we're entering this eat the rich phase, I just want to make sure, like, that's just not a term that you play around with, right? Like, if you know history, this is where history class comes into play. But societies have risen up against empires before and power structures before. And eat the rich is a very real thing, and it costs lives. Whether that's worth it or not is not for me to. I'm not speculating on, but I just want people to understand, you know, what the term actually means. I'm gonna put the second the topic up, and Omar, let's just start with you because you were already there. And then while you're talking, I don't want you to feel like I'm cutting you off. While you're talking, I'm gonna put up on the screen something that I think is very interesting to what you all said around how are people celebrating this. So go ahead.
Man, ain't no cutting off, man. There's a conversation, man. People talk when we're talking. One thing that keeps going through my head, and it's weird because I've been thinking about it a lot. I don't know, David, Doc, you may be familiar with this psychological experiment. Pretty common one, right? So imagine
just for the record, in this conversation, you ask people are celebrating it. Over 100,000
people bought
Luigi Pom Pom knit beanies. Like, they're like selling out. The prices, it's so funny because ironically, Omar and I were talking about the inflation on these little Bass Pro Shop hats that are kind of taking over the hip hop world and different places and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh no, where I was at, it was kind of like $40, $50. Like, it's a $6 hat, right? It's like, well, so ironically, people are buying these Luigi hats. This is going to become the new, what was the mask in what was it called? It's the Guy Fawkes mask from V for Vendetta.
Yeah, from V for Vendetta.
This is the, you know, I would hate for this to be the the official mascot or uniform for the V for Vendetta type of vibes, but
yeah, good luck wearing that beanie when you're on a Zoom call with your healthcare provider trying to get a claim approved.
Yeah, but I mean, but you know, maybe we're just a little old for revolution. But is a revolution ever? Is a revolution?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, here's the thing. So he goes, assuming that he did it. He goes out and he commits this murder, right? Poorly planned, gets caught pretty quickly, and the goal is to push this conversation forward, right? Have a national conversation about the high cost of healthcare and about, you know, I think somewhere the rate's different, but somewhere between like 20 and 50% of claims are denied by health care insurers, and so that's a big number. That's a lot of people. That's not the 27 million that Omar referenced that are uninsured. These are insured people that are getting rejected at high rates for claims. So, you know, he wants to push this conversation, this dialogue. You know, is this the right way to go about doing it? I don't think so. I think what's more likely to happen, and you're already seeing it, is like people are going to focus on the fact that he had a ghost gun, right? And so let's talk about ghost guns, right? Mm-hmm. And so you might see some movement maybe on ghost guns, especially with some of our
well, I'm in Chicago, bro. Ghost guns is it's a huge thing.
They're everywhere, you know. So maybe that'll get some attention, but I don't know if this maybe there is this is the beginning of a trend or a movement. I'm not talking about the assassination part, but there is definitely some historical context here for what we might be seeing.
Well, yeah. I mean, I want to actually say, there is a trend in a movement, but I got to tell you, like, this could be a one-off. But if look, dude, most people who are going to buy a Luigi hat are going to opt into like Occupy Wall Street and then show up and be like, what are we doing again? But like, for all the hundreds of thousands that are buying the Luigi hat, David, there's going to be hundreds that are oftentimes going to be like, I'm going to follow suit. In the psychology of this, of moments like this, there are those copycats who will decide to do what he did for the exact same motivation and reason. And then there will be those copycats because it's their moment, their 15 minutes. And I think therein lies we're just beginning to see what unfolds scenario here. But I got it like shifted into, I think what I'm looking at, because it goes back to Doc's first question, a bit about the second question, is that there's a psychological experiment at play here. And I'll be, kind of concise about it, which is, imagine I have $100. So to our audience, I've got $100 and I'm going to give $98 to David. And Doc, you get $2. How do you feel about that?
I mean, well, I know where you go ahead. I mean, it's not fair.
You know exactly where I'm going with this.
It's inequitable. I mean, I have more questions, but I don't want to be super nerdy on your example. So go ahead.
Yeah. Well, no.
What are we doing? What, maybe he earned $100 and I earned $1. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, no. I got $100 and I'm just being benevolent, and I'm just like, hey, I'm gonna give this away, and I don't need the $100, so I'm just gonna give 98 to Dave, and I'm gonna give 2 to you. There was no work, there was no anything. I just gave it away.
Well, if you're benevolent, and I mean, I didn't do nothing to deserve it, and thank you for the $2. But I'm different. I don't, you know what I'm saying? Like,
you are. So you are in the less than 5% of recipients who would say, well, I'm $2 richer. 95% of people within this experiment would be like, I don't want your $2. This is unfair. And then I mentioned, well, how is it unfair? You're $2 richer. Like, yeah, but he's getting 98. It doesn't matter that we have a capitalistic society. It does not matter that there are so-called rules under this capitalistic society. What happens in the psychology of humans, 95% in this particular experiment, is that they are fucking upset that they got 2 and somebody else got 98. Even though that's $2 more than they had 2 seconds ago,
Mhm.
and they did nothing to earn it.
Mhm.
There is, like Carl Jung talked about,
Yeah.
the moral compass that we have as humans that we can't explain where we got it from. Like, it's not nature, or excuse me, it's not nurture, it's nature. We got embedded with this like psychological moral compass. And I think what's going on in society right now is that moral compass is saying, why does this CEO who is denying claims, and by
Mm.
the way, Luigi, who had, I believe, 3 bullets, or in his manifesto, 3 bullets that said defend, deny, and depose, which, by the
Yeah.
way, for our audience, that's the 3 Ds of insurance companies. We deny claims,
Mhm.
we defend ourselves and our money, and if that doesn't work, we get into legal action and we
Take
depose
you to
until
court.
they give up, take you to court.
Yeah.
He had 3
Crazy.
bullets saying that. And that what's getting to me is that, how does this CEO who is denying, defending, and deposing, who's making all this money, how is it fair that they get to make all this money and people don't have health insurance?
Oh, it's
How is
crazy.
it fair that this person gets to make all this money and people are starving? When I say I've studied revolutions, this is the advent of
Yeah.
revolutions. But I got to
Yep.
tell you, like, oftentimes this is when like FBI and everybody gets deeply involved, because they're like, oh shit.
So
Like,
you
this
think
is
we're
this
entering that phase? Oh, just before we go to David, are we
a
entering the phase?
100%. The
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
is that we entered that phase with Occupy Wall Street, but they had no
But see,
organization,
that's different.
no
And
idea
that's what
what
I'm
they were
saying.
doing.
Like, I don't, and stand by, David. I don't want you to
It
lose
is
it, right?
different.
No,
Yes.
yeah,
I'm
fine.
with you.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is the difference is, and again, I was there for Occupy. I went out, I seen it, I was around. This is different. A shot was fired, a person was
Yes.
murdered. You know what I'm saying? And the copycats in this is what I'm saying. Eat the rich carries a different connotation than
Indeed.
the 1% and the 99, right? Like, so
Yeah.
David, you're gonna
Well,
jump in there, and I have
Mhm.
something to show you all after you go, David.
he's not. So yeah, this is interesting. The whole the theory of eat the rich. Are we at this moment? So I wonder if what I'm thinking about now is how much of this of Luigi's plan revolved around the known issues that we've talked about, that we've all experienced in the healthcare insurance industry, right? And then how much of it was directed towards just the outlier, freakish nature of this guy's salary. You know, he was on a he was so when you think about like I think where Omar's going is like we have this case where this guy was literally, he was not just a 1%er, he was
Right.
a 0.1%er. 0.1.
0.01 or something like that. Yeah.
$1 million base salary, you know, bonuses in the
That's just
millions,
base.
stock options. It comes out for 2023 total compensation package for one man, $10 million. That's where everything kind of gets warped, and people are just like, 10 million, you know, people won't make $10 million in a lifetime, right? Most of us won't, right? I mean, not even close. I mean, but this guy, you know, it's like,
Do not
forget
post
about the
that
fact
last
that he,
comment from Bill Conrad. Thank you very much. Don't accidentally post it. Continue. We love you, Bill. God damn. Go ahead, David.
forget about the guys. Forget about the industry. Like, think about a society where we have people, you know, that are literally trying to scrape by, you know, on what California's new minimum wage is, like $20 an hour or whatever it is, right? I don't know if Texas has a minimum wage, probably not, but you know, and then you go all the way up to this guy that's in the ultra elite in terms of income, total compensation earners, $10 million a year for 1 year's worth of work.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I don't know how, and if they were able to kind of unpack and fix and repair this broken system and get, move their claims numbers, their refusal numbers down to like 10% and bring more people into the fold with, figuring out how to subsidize care for people. Sure. But the guy's just he's literally the front man for a massive industry. And so I guess going back to what Omar was saying, if you're the front man sometimes, and the direction of the wind is changing, you're going to be the first one.
Man, listen, it's so interesting because does anybody remember what was happening right before this happened? It was the anesthesia thing from Anthem Blue. And for those that don't know, in New York or around the northeastern seaboard, it was if you get allotted a certain amount of anesthesia, and before, if you were to start waking up or whatever, they would give you more anesthesia. When I tore my ACL, MCL, and my meniscus, I had to have a major surgery, and I remember it. I started to come to during the procedure. My body, I never really I don't know. It's just I have a weird body, so they had to give me more anesthesia. Under this new rule from Anthem Blue, they would not give you any more anesthesia for free. You'd have to pay for it out of pocket. Well, the day after this assassination,
they ask you like when you're like on the operating table, they're like, we need you to fill out some more forms.
Look,
I like just tough it out. Tough it out, man. Come on.
I don't know if they would have had your credit card information and got your authorization beforehand. I have no idea, but they got rid of that shit ASAP. And then, as you can see, Congress has also stepped in, or new House bill would ban insurers from limited anesthesia coverage. So this guy or this situation, this assassination, is touching other things. It's actually, and in the same vein, these CEOs of insurance companies, they are now changing their about pages. They're taking pictures down so you can't identify them. So I think you hit it on the head, Omar, when I asked if we were entering into the eat the rich phase. I think you might be onto something there. I think we are. And that brings me to the next question, right? Because this is the South Star Classroom and we specialize in education. So how should schools and educators approach this conversation in this moment? Is it a conversation that should even be had in schools? Is it, and I do want to start with you, David, just because you have the son out of us, is this one, I don't know if he's still in school, but if he is still in school, are they talking about this? Is it coming up? Is it just in the hallways, or is his teachers talking about it? And two, is that something you would want them to even talk about, or is this a conversation that you were able to have in him or you want to?
Great question. I
know
I would say,
sorry, it's kind of packed.
I mean, no, it's great. And I think for the first piece around what's happening in his school, I would say, he attends a big, large school in a big school district, and they tend to stay away from controversial topics. So probably not a lot at school, but I will tell you, I did have a conversation with him 2 or 3 days ago. And, kind of typically, like if I were an educator and if there was no guidance coming out of the administration, especially in high school, kids are going to be talking about it. Young people are going to be talking about it. You have kids, they might not bring it to you, but they're like hearing it, right? And it's a crazy story. And so I think, my approach has always been, both as a parent and as an educator, is to just listen to kids, right? Ask them what questions they have. Ask them what they know. What have you heard? What do you know about the situation? What questions do you have about it? And start there. I think it's very easy, and we've seen this on a number of different topics, and we've probably I know we've experienced it as teachers and people that work in schools. There's like an agenda that people want to put out there. So I'm going to use this as an opportunity to teach the students under my care about the evils of capitalism, right? Or whatever the argument is on the other side. I'm going to go crazy on the gun issue, or whatever it is. I think that's where we do a disservice to kids. And you know, if you're a parent, you can teach your kid whatever whatever that you want. You know,
Right.
They'll eventually make their own decisions and make their minds up. But I think just listening, asking questions, because I mean, we're having this conversation here. This thing is pretty fresh. I still have questions. Who do I ask?
Too. I do too. I do too. I mean, a history, you know, the silver line is a history teacher. None of us are. This might be their moment. They might be like, oh, now you want to hear about the French Revolution. Okay, let's go, damn it.
Yeah.
Omar,
Yeah.
You lead a school. You lead a very successful, set of schools. Tell me, man, should schools be talking about this? How? Like, how should educators be approaching this conversation, if at all?
Yeah, man, great question. And really good segue because you're talking about like history teachers. And I was like, yeah, man, I was a history teacher.
Oh,
That's
you
how I got
were? I
started.
didn't know that, man. I'm
100%.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, no apologies.
I know
man.
we
That's how I
poli-sci
got-
people, and that we're always disconnected, but yeah.
Oh
history.
yeah. No, man, I got the minor in history and was a teacher for 7 years. Including my
Wait, do me a
no one
favor,
counts
do me a
theirs.
favor. Do me a favor. Answer this
Yep.
as you, Omar, but then I'm going to give you freedom and a pass to nerd out as a history teacher and how you would geek out next week if you were still in the classroom. But
I'll
go
do
ahead,
both,
Omar.
man. They're the two are deeply interconnected, man. Who you get as a teacher is who you're
And
gonna get as a
you
human
cannot
being,
you
man.
cannot include Marie Antoinette and the guillotine in your answer.
You have to.
Easy. Oh no, I don't. Check this out. So 7th grade Texas history. I mean, I did this all the time. I want this in 11th grade history. First off, 100% we're talking about this in school, and 100% we're talking about this in history class. So Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States. For our audience, if you have not read People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn, also mentioned in Good Will Hunting, by the way, amazing movie. Like, that is the book that is going to, like, as Matt Damon said, blow your hair back. So forget about Marie Antoinette and forget about the guillotine. Let's talk about James Garfield. Let's talk about labor unions. So in Howard Zinn's history book, they go into the labor union component of the United States in extraordinary detail. So you have fat cat corporations that are extremely unregulated, not paying their workers a wage that is even remotely resembling what the heads of these companies are making. This is that eat the rich moment where labor unions started coming together. And then this is where the United States government hired Pinkerton, the at the time
Union
private
Buster, baby.
security, who was like the precursor to the Secret Service, to fucking go and spy on the labor unions to purposely break them up because the heads of those companies were paying for presidential elections. I mean, you're talking about Rutherford B. Hayes. You're talking about Garfield. Hell, Garfield got killed because of a job. James Cocteau murdered him because he didn't believe in the crony system anymore. That was all tied to the labor unions. And the labor unions were trying to go and say, we deserve a good wage. Does this all sound familiar? We deserve a good working week where we're not working 12 hours a day for 6 days a week. We deserve greater level of equitable contribution to the worker. Because, like, hey, man, how are we supposed to pay for our families on this? And look, CEOs, go make your money. But if you're making 10 million and the person in your company is making $12 an hour, we've got a bit of an issue here, because as people are starving and people are literally buying yachts, you've got a huge component within the U.S. history curriculum to discuss this exact event. Because when I tell you I've studied revolutions, dude, the labor union revolution was very similar. And by the way, there were like fucking murders, man. Like people, these labor guys went out and started riots and started murdering cats that worked at these companies, started murdering police officers who got in their way. It is an often unheard of component in United States history. But I'm sitting here looking at this situation and saying to myself, hey man, it's weird that an Ivy League rich kid was the one who decided to move this forward, but I don't think it'll be weird that there is subsequent follow-up from other people who are extremely disheartened at the way that this country has treated them, extremely disheartened at the fact that like the rich are in a position that they may not believe that they deserve to be in. Or in your case, Doc, and in Bill Conrad's case, and in most people's case, pretty pissed off at the insurance companies making outright profits at the expense of people's health. I mean, we talk about health as a human right, and I believe so, but I think that's still a debate within the United States. I can't debate
We don't believe that
the
shit.
fact that insurance companies have any right to exist. And like, you want to talk to Omar, not the history professor, I'll go into Omar. I think insurance companies are full of shit. I don't think they should fucking exist. Dude, if I were president, the first thing I do is figure out how do I completely destroy insurance companies. And if people are like, oh, nationalized medicine is terrible and it doesn't work, I'm like, not when you do it well. I don't hear people in Scandinavia being super pissed off. When the British system, before the conservatives destroyed it 14 years ago, it was the beacon of what a national healthcare system should look like. You're like, well, I heard this story about this rich guy waiting for a long time and he had to come to the United States. And I'm like, yeah, because he's rich, because he couldn't wait the 3 weeks. We should have a nationalized healthcare system. We should not have insurance companies. You're some weird middleman making a ton of money off of the health and misery of Americans. Like, I gotta tell you, man, it's really terrible with me. That is a like entrepreneur, pioneering spirit of the United States. So Omar would get rid of all the insurance companies. I don't know how I could tie that in directly into the school, but I would tie that into an economics course. What are the economics of ridding the insurance company? How much taxes will we need to create a national healthcare system? And wouldn't Americans be paying exponentially less under this system than with insurance companies? There's a good econ class. Study the labor unions and the presidencies of, say, like James Garfield, Dwight Eisenhower, FDR, particularly Calvin Coolidge, Warren G. Harding, and Herbert Hoover, who created the Great Depression, deregulated everything, and tried to bronco bust every single labor union. That's a history class we're talking about. And then you will see what happened during those times. And if anything like that happens again, you can expect some very interesting ramifications and a lot of violence, Doc. I think if history repeats itself, we will see a lot more before we see a lot less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also with Bill Conrad, I don't think that it's actually possible to balance capitalism and socialism. And I think both of them.
I think we see it in some if you look at like many European countries, you see a mix of capitalism and socialism.
I just think I think that whichever one teeters, whichever one is 51% the thing is what's going to be kind of reigning supreme. I think highly over capitalistic places suffer, and I think highly socialist places suffer. And there was a whole war about it, but I will say, I mean, America's a capitalist place, but except if you're very rich and then it's socialist for you. I will say this, it's the end of the year. It's the end of the year. So what am I doing all week, this week and next week, right? And instead of just, in addition to just working, I am going to the dentist. I'm going to do all my healthcare stuff because a lot of stuff doesn't roll over. I have been broke most of my life. I just started to get a decent little chunk of change. Still not rich. Still none of that. This right here, this little hole missing. I've kept that hole. I could pay to get the tooth you know, redone, and maybe I will. I may get an implant at some point, right? But I kept it because this is reminding me of when I was like really broke, right? When I needed a root canal, they did the first parts of it, and then the next part, the crown and everything like that, was going to cost X amount of dollars. That just would have been devastating. Like I wouldn't have been able to pay my rent at the time. I wouldn't have been able to do those things. So it's like trying to keep it clean or whatever, and then eventually you can't, right? Like there's a reason why crowns are a thing and they exist. You know, the tooth fell out. A lot of people had that little side tooth gap thing that's going on. I say that to say, you know, dealing with insurance who tells you what they need to tell you to get you and to have you there and do everything in their power to deny your claim. I've never seen so many. I never knew there were so many acts of God for a place that don't believe in the Lord. It's so many things that qualify as acts of God. I had, when I bought this house, there was a thing that happened and it flooded. I had every type of insurance endorsement except for this specific one that's at the bottom of page such and such. And it cost me, you know, tons of money, right? And by the grace of God, I was okay. Here's the other side of this, though. And here's why I was asking about the school piece. Young people are impressionable. I think there has to be, if you teach about revolutions, you have to teach it in a holistic 360 way, because there are martyrs in revolutions. And when you strike empires and you strike power, power strikes back. And just wanting and people to understand that, you know, some of these are some really cool stories in history. It's like, I need you to read 2 more pages about what they did when they caught that person. I need you to read a few more pages about what happened to Joan of Arc. I need you to read how that went. I need you to read, you know, what happened in France after that head got chopped off. I need you to know how that Napoleon story went. And I'm not saying that to try to throw anybody off for that. I'm not about to, try to necessarily take up for that rich class. Here's the thing, though, as somebody who grew up in abject poverty, and I think that you all are very familiar with this as well. Everybody that had more money than the people that I knew and lived in my neighborhood, they were all rich. They were all, it didn't matter if they were a millionaire or a billionaire. And you might remember this, David. They would be like, no, that's the billionaire class. But these people, I'm like, but they millionaires. Like, I have nothing in common with the millionaire or the billionaire, because I'm really out here eating top ramen right now. And so what I'm saying that because if this eat the rich thing does catch on, a lot of us who see ourselves as very common people, you know, that beautiful house that we see in your backdrop, my backdrop, you know, Omar's backdrop, to somebody, we are the rich. And I think it's just really interesting. Like, you just have to engage in this in a way, and there are going to be unintended consequences. So just be aware, and you can't always solve for those unintended consequences. And listen, sometimes that's just the fee to play. You know, sometimes that's just the price to pay for a revolution and to move society forward. But, you know, it's just, as an educator, and when you talk to people about stuff, I'm always leery when somebody gives a half truth and a half lesson and leaves out the consequences of that thing, even if what you're doing is righteous, at least in your head. That was the only point that I wanted to make.
Well, that was quite the point.
I mean, hey, man, to somebody, we're like, in my family,
good ass point.
I'm the first in my family to go to college, bro. Like, they think when I say no to certain family members that love me, and there's certain family members I only hear from when they need something. And then when I can say yes a million times, and the first time you say no, now you forgot where you come from, and this, that, and the third. It's a problem.
And I will say this is that, like, I think American history books, and the reason that I'm a huge fan of Howard Zinn, are indoctrinating, particularly the ones in Texas. So I'm not for going in and lecturing kids and indoctrinating them. In fact, just the exact opposite. I think history is the catalyst for critical thought. That's where I think it's the best place to teach critical thought. And like I've said this a couple of times on the show, man, like one of my favorite exercises, even in 7th grade with my 7th graders, was like, here's your book. Here's this history event. Here's Howard Zinn's take. I need you to read these 2. I need you to do a basic compare and contrast, and then create a thesis. Which one do you think is right and why? Let them make the decision.
Right.
I got to tell you, like, the minute they read Zinn, they were like, what is this, dude? Holy smokes, this is awesome. Like, of course I believe this. This is way more detailed. Kids can sniff out bullshit. And I got to tell you, I am not about
Wait, can they? Because Columbus it was taught for a long time that Columbus discovered America for a very, very, very
that's the
long
history
time.
textbooks, man. It's bullshit. But like, if you don't have an alternative, Doc,
Right.
how are they
Right.
supposed
That's
to
what they
know?
didn't have. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. You put Howard Zinn in front of them, they'll sniff out the bullshit from the textbook. But if given no other options, those textbooks are indoctrination. It is
Absolutely.
America is the best. It is the
Yeah.
capitalist system works perfectly well. And to agree with Bill Conrad, I'm with you about balancing capitalism and socialism. What everyone forgets is that the United States Army is the greatest socialist experiment on the face of the planet. There is no greater job system on the planet than the United States military. It is the largest and heaviest socialist experiment literally in the face of human history. And it has been, for the most part, quite a success.
Unless you were black during certain times or people of color, because it absolutely, it was the best housing program and it was the best entry into the middle class, except if you're one of those brown soldiers who could not get the house.
Yeah, man, I mean, that's the
But that's
asterisk
socialism.
into everything that's America.
Right,
Hey,
right.
things are going really well, except for you brownies over here. Why don't you go back to Mexico on your plate of rice and beans? Condoleezza Rice, we should put her on a plate of beans. Sounds like a Mexican dish. I'm like, hey, man, I didn't cross the border, man. The border crossed us.
me.
The border literally crossed David's family.
Yeah.
Literally, he was in Texas. It was Mexico, and next thing you know, he's like, "Wait, what? Where are we again?" But like, this is, to your point, the huge disparity that I find is that in Americans' educational system, where is the alternative to the textbook indoctrination? Because you're asking, should this be taught? And I am saying, not only should it be taught, but kids are learning how to critically think when they see two totally different perspectives, have to discuss and dissect the facts, and then come up to a conclusion. Because regardless of the conclusion my students came to, if they were able to defend their argument with evidence, they got the A.
Absolutely.
Because the A wasn't about what side you chose. It was about, did you learn the skill set of critical thought? And did you learn to actually back up your claims? Which, by the way, we need a lot more of in America, because not only are we in a weird eat the rich phase, we're in a fucking weird ass, I'm just going to start spouting off a bunch of bullshit phase because I read it somewhere on social media, didn't do a goddamn piece of critical thinking and research, and I'm just going to spout these opinions off as my own. And again,
hey, man, I heard it on Joe Rogan, man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh no,
hey, man,
Joe Rogan
Rogan
said it. CNN, man. Like, you know what I'm saying? That you can't. Though that's the ones that scare me. Joe Rogan can be off. Them damn legacy media places is when they get it wrong. That scares me. But gentlemen, we've covered a lot, and we had a nice little tight show that was pretty easy. So thank you, fellas. I want to roll into final thoughts and get y'all out of here on time. But Omar, you're on fire. So how about you continue? And David, you're on deck.
Yeah, man. We asked the critical question about what we can do to teach about these scenarios and whether or not they belong in school. And I think my final thought is that beyond the component of teaching literacy and math skills, which are deeply needed and embedded into the core of anyone's ability to grow and think and be able to read, I'm a big believer in critical thinking. I'm a huge believer in seeing totally different opinions, getting that information, understanding it, dissecting it, and being taught a skill set. This scenario is imbued in United States history. Like I said, I have named several times in just the 20th century, least of all the 19th, the 1800s were riddled with scenarios just like this. The 1700s were too, where this is a critical junction in history that we have had historical precedents to look at and decipher what will happen next. If you keep doing what we have been doing, which is hide it, disguise it, protect the children, this is why you've got a bunch of fucking millennials and Gen Zers that are like so entitled, being like, oh my God, this hurts my sensitivities. And it's like, the world is a really difficult place. And I think schools and homes are places to teach our children how to survive in a deeply difficult, deeply complex, oftentimes insanely violent place.
Mhm.
And if we keep saying that the world is this sugar-coated place where everyone gets participation trophies and every opinion matters, fucking it doesn't. It doesn't. Your opinion is your opinion. And that's good that you've got one. But if you're not thinking about the ramifications of how that affects society, you're a selfish asshole. Just to sound like Lewis Black.
Mhm.
I think it's selfish of us to not have these critical conversations in schools and in homes because it teaches kids critical thought and it prepares them for the difficult realities. What do I think is happening societally? Holy shit. You have a scenario where you just had someone gun down a prominent CEO, you will have copycats. Do I want that to happen? Clearly,
Mhm.
I'm not an advocate of this kind of situation. I'm just saying I've studied enough in history to realize, oh, I think this is only the beginning, gentlemen. So maybe next week we can kind of chime in and see what has happened. But I would be looking at this over the next several months and decipher one instance is just a one off, a second instance is just a duplicate. The third time, ladies and gentlemen, is a pattern. And that is what I'm waiting to see. Will this become a pattern or not?
Mm.
Historically, it has, but this could be different.
David.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, we'll see if this pattern thing shakes out. But I wanted to go back quickly because Omar was talking about, like if you were in the classroom, if you were teaching. I think one way to approach this, and typically if you're teaching, and at least in California, you might not get to this until students get into the 12th grade. You start talking about like economics, right? Like focused economics. But you can start much earlier of like having a conversation, having a dialogue, looking at the dynamics of history and, I mean, essentially politics, right? Politics is a study of power, right? Who gets what, why, and how. And thinking about goods, right? Goods and services. Thinking about the concept of like, what are we okay with as a society? We've all agreed it's a public good, right? Public education. Um, in some cases, public housing. In some cases, public subsidies. There are certain things where he said like public is good, and we do have a version of like public healthcare in the form of like the government affiliated programs, but most of it happens outside of that. And so, like, are we okay with the future of saying like, can we agree that healthcare, because it involves people's health, should be something that we just completely take out of the private sector, move into the public sector, because it should not be a profit-driven industry. That's like if I were teaching, I think that's an interesting conversation to have with young people, both around government and also like ethics, right? You can get into like philosophy with it. I think number two, when I was a high school teacher, I taught Zen for sure. We had a regular textbook and we had Zen, and we read more out of Zen than we did, the other textbook. And you can do that. You can do both. You can actually survive in a system. Students can be prepared to take a standardized test where they know that the correct answer is actually historically not correct, right? And that's what we did. And so I think just in terms of like this moment that we're in as a country, I want to go back to a famous George Carlin joke, right? And I'm just going to read it, and I'm not going to do an impersonation of George Carlin. Maybe I will.
I think a proper impersonation requires a lot of cocaine. So
exactly, yeah. All right. He says, people say America's so divided these days, like it's the worst it's ever been, right? Really? You ever heard of the Civil War? That's when half the country packed a lunch, walked to the other half, and said, hey, we're here to kill you. Now that's commitment. Nowadays, people just tweet at each other from the other side of the room. That's lazy division.
He said that he's man. When did Carlin die? What year? Was Twitter around? I didn't know Twitter was around when he died.
Yeah,
for sure.
It was definitely around for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It must. I mean, I'm just it's we just lost one of the greats, man.
2008.
2008. So it was like brand new.
Yeah.
Listen, man.
And he knew. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because this shit has been going in cycles. I just appreciate everybody on this show, and we miss Jubilee. I think this was a really good conversation. I think looking at ripping things from the headlines and then applying it to education is what we expect good educators to do, and to inspire critical thinking. I am somebody. It might sound like I'm very cautious or not on this revolutionary tip. I love revolutionaries. I study them. I kind of worship them a little bit. I grew up, under the Panthers, and born in the same neighborhood and community as Fred Hampton, and a big Huey P. Newton guy, and Elaine Brown, who was the first woman to run the Panthers when Huey had to go away for a little bit. Like, she's the one who told me I was writing my book. Like, that's where I came up around. I also just know what happened to each of those people in just various ways. Like Cesar Chavez is just an incredible revolutionary, and with an incredibly difficult life. And it takes real sacrifice. And I don't know if everybody is willing to pay the toll that's there. But I do think it's to spark a larger conversation and question, as we have, right? Like, this is getting out of control. I don't think people have a problem with seeing rich people or a slew or here or there or whatever the case is. A regular Americans like that there's a Beverly Hills too. But the thing is, the gap is getting so wide. And when you do things like nickel and dime on anesthesia, when you take things that people need to live, when somebody lost a loved one because they didn't have good insurance, or they had to go through a bunch of things, or people do become incensed, and you can't keep ripping people's heart out and expect not to bleed a little bit. And I'm just saying that for people that are, especially the people that are listening, that are growing up in very, very, very privileged spaces, that may not know poverty or may not know these things, but being poor will make you do some things. And I'm talking to the crowd. There's two types of people. There's people that say, well, money won't solve everything. And then there's poor people who've never experienced money that you can't say that to. And I just wanted people to be mindful of that. And with that being said, man, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and keep your head on the swivel. I love you, fellas. I think we're going to take a bit of a hiatus for the holidays. But if I don't see David, Jubilee, or Omar, I love you all. I hope you have an incredible time with your families. Cherish this time. Between COVID, between these assassinations, between who's president, money situation, who knows what tomorrow brings. Spend some time with your loved ones, hug them, touch grass, and don't let all your thoughts come from that little device on your phone. With that, take care of yourself, take care of each other. We'll see you all in a few weeks.
David,
y'all have a
we'll
good
be back. We'll be back next week, and then we're going to take a break.
Oh, got you. I'm sorry. Yeah. I am hobbling through this. So
all good, man.
We'll see you all back next week, and then we'll take
big show. Big show next week.
Y'all have a good one. Peace out, fellas.
Later, y'all.
Today's episode of BS3 Network is brought to you by McDonald's. McDonald's is going to McDonald's and creating a universe for longtime fans of both McDonald's and anime. I love sauce on my McNuggets and can't wait to try the savory chili McDonald's sauce. It's savory, chili, and bold. For decades, across various episodes and genres, McDonald's has shown up in the anime world and most commonly called McDonald's. McDonald's will be bringing the McDonald's world to life with episodic shorts and manga comics. For a limited time, anime fans will have the opportunity to experience their favorite fictional restaurant. You have until March 25th to try the new savory chili McDonald's sauce with your 10-piece chicken nuggets.